Caitlin, you did a great job with the presentation yesterday. And thank you so much for the shout out to the old school. Yay.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad you were there.
Yeah, it was really good. It took me a while to actually get into that. And I kept saying, they have to let me in. I signed up for this. I really, really want to hear what she has to say. So it was really, really good.
Thank you.
What was the presentation, Caitlin?
It was for pet finders. They did their adoption options series of webinars. They did their typically normal workshops online this year, and it was on what 2020 can teach us about the future of marketing.
Sounds very interesting.
Is it recorded somewhere, Caitlin? Oh, you're muted.
It is. I'll grab the link and I'll put it in the chat.
Good.
Yeah, I'd like to see it. That sounds awesome.
How is everyone doing while we're waiting for people to hop on? How are you all?
Good.
Glorious.
Lovely.
Glorious.
Wow.
I'm
Very
like energized after our Haas meeting today. I'm like, yes, do all that.
We'll get it.
The waiting room slows down like the beginning of these meetings. So just give a couple minutes for people to hop on here. We have a really exciting topic and some very knowledgeable speakers with us today. And thanks to everyone for joining.
You know, Rory, that, you know, while we're waiting for the waiting room, I am fascinated by the concept, and this is, you know, me, my brain, that if you got together a session with speakers who are not knowledgeable, what would that look like? How would that go? I think that could be fun.
I'm here to say that I don't know if I am super knowledgeable on this topic. And so I'm hoping that this can actually be a true summit where we solve this problem together.
I don't know. I just think getting a bunch of people from disparate areas together, like not even animal welfare, but just like disparate things, and then saying, here's your topic, go. That maybe it's a comedy routine. I don't know.
I love that. It's like improv.
It's my brain. I don't know. Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
My fellow collaborator.
So I think we can go ahead and get started as we wait for people to join us. So a couple of things, and Kelly, I made you a co-host, so if you can help me with the waiting room, that would be amazing.
Sure, happy to.
So a couple of housekeeping items. We are going to be structuring the summits moving forward with a question and focusing on elements. So a question related to elements, and then we'll be bringing in working groups that are related to those elements and helping us to answer these questions to facilitate some of these conversations. So every other week we'll have working groups here, and on the off weeks we'll have people who come in with solutions to those questions. So wanted to kind of just give a brief update about that. And then moving into our topic today, which is sort of what allowed for us to come up with this idea, which I hope works for all of us. I was having a conversation with Tori and Teresa from KC Pet Project, and they brought up this question about, while we're messaging to the community about changing the way that we do intake, focusing on only bringing animals into our shelters that truly need shelter, how do we continue to market ourselves as the place to come get pets? And so I thought that was such an interesting topic. And I don't know the answer to that. And so I thought this would be a really good place for us to come together and sort of talk through that. And I'd love to hear from some of the shelters. And we have Tori here today, we have Kelly Dewar, we have Casey Spain, who are all marketing heroes. We have Caitlin Quinn on the call today. So curious to hear, just before we get started, if other people have thought through this, and maybe Tori, you can add a little bit more about what you were seeing in your organization, and then we can hear from some other organizations to just get going.
Sure. Yeah. I just sent Teresa the link because I know she's driving right now. It's like, you should like jump on while you're in your car. Yeah, we've been just sort of struggling, and not really struggling, but just having the conversations at KC Pet Project about like the perception of what shelters have always been is, you know, an adoption center. This is the place where people bring their pets if they can't have them anymore, or this is the place where lost pets go. And so we're in the business of life-saving and finding homes for pets. And if you're anything like us, you just get inundated at times with, and everybody's full, and, you know, just we always have pets that are looking for homes. So in a HOS world where we are doing a lot of community work to keep pets out of the shelter and keep them with their families, as we should be doing, and getting more lost pets home, putting more pets in foster homes, and having to figure out those adoption processes, which we've been constantly evolving ours at KC Pet Project. And I know Kelly can talk a lot about that, but also how do you still be an adoption center where you have pets that are available for adoptions for people that are looking, especially if you have other shelters that are non-HOS shelters in your community that are still going to be doing things the way that you normally do. Or, you know, it's like, if somebody wants a pet, where do they go in this HOS world to find a pet available for adoption? And even for us, we've been really seeing the community support is still there for people wanting to adopt. Like we're getting over 1,000 animals a month in right now, even trying to establish a lot of these community programs. And our pets are flying out of the shelter. This time last year, we would have animals sitting here for 90 days, 120 days, 6 months, not moving. And now our length of stay in the shelter is like, I mean, pets are gone within 2 weeks. And if they're here 2 weeks, we're like, we got to market this pet and get it out of here, or put it in a foster home. You know, it's like the way that we do things now is totally different, and the demand is still there to adopt. And so for the first time, we're reaching out to try to bring dogs into the shelter from other community shelters that are maybe struggling with space. But then once we bring animals in, we could be bringing in, you know, a lot of them don't come spayed and neutered. A lot of them don't come ready to go to be available for adoption. Some may have medical behavior. And so then we're putting more resources into those animals, when it's like the conundrum is, do we try to help those shelters with the HOS model to keep those pets with their families in those other municipal shelters that are around us, or in some of the nonprofit shelters that are around us? And so this constant like conundrum that's going on in our head, like how do you still have supply and demand in a HOS world for the people that want to adopt a pet and want a pet in their lives, while also focusing on these community programs? And so not losing sight of the fact that we are saving lives. We're, you know, making matches with people that want to adopt a pet, but also doing our HOS thing. So that's kind of the thing that we've been struggling with a little bit, and just trying to figure out the messaging around there without saying like what we're doing and what we've always been doing is a problem, that we're trying to like overcome this problem that we've, you know, been doing the sheltering like this for a long time. But anyway, I'll stop talking and get everybody else's thoughts.
And we have Claire on the call too, and other Maddie's instructors, and Claire is the lead of the supply and demand working group. And so Claire, I would love to hear if you all are talking about this particular issue too, and then hear more from the shelters as well.
Yeah, for sure. We are talking about it. We've got a lot of work to do when it comes around this, but when we're looking at the data, one of the most striking stats that we've seen, and it's sort of disappointing, is the data around response rate. And so Adopt a Pet and Care has done a lot of work around this to see, you know, the number one reason why people are getting denied or why they weren't able to find a pet. And, you know, 47% of people said they weren't ever responded to. And I think we've talked about that in this summit. And so that's such a huge number, and it just shows all the work that we have to do with customer service. we know that, we've been very successful, I feel, as an industry, and in some ways of being able to facilitate adoptions without having to do the traditional kennel browsing, knowing that dogs and cats don't present well in a kennel setting in general. Meeting with a foster parent is a much more natural situation, and a lot of times can be just more informative and hopefully better customer service. But I just think there's so much room around that we can improve in that area, that I'm not, I guess, too worried that if, people aren't coming directly to the shelter. I feel like COVID has also shown us that we have a lot of ability, a lot of room to grow just through doing things virtually. But customer service, I think, is going to be number one in order for us to keep moving forward and keep allowing people to adopt and enabling them to find the dogs and cats that they're looking for.
Thanks, Claire. And Mary, I know this has been a topic that you've been interested in over the years. Do you have any thoughts off the top of your head?
Well, I wanted to kind of throw something out that's probably not very popular, but I'm going to do it anyway, because I really agree with Claire about customer service needs to be better. But let's imagine for a minute that we had like the best customer service ever. The reality is we're not going to have enough animals for all of the people who want animals. So when do we start to establish relationships with the people that I call in the community, the local entrepreneurs, those who have, let's say, some dogs in their lives that they really like, and they're doing some breeding. They're not doing like a full-blown major, operation, but they want to have a couple litters or whatnot. And so they're making their puppies available. So when do we have relationships with those folks, not to shut them down, but to help them provide a really good environment for their animals and be able to, help them become part of the safety net? Or is that just so completely outside the realm of anything anybody's doing that I'm insane for even raising the question?
I'm curious to hear Claire's response, because I think there's been a lot of conversation about that in the supply and demand group. And I think, sorry, did I interrupt you? And I think that, yeah, I'm curious to hear Claire's thoughts on that particular topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what we're struggling with, honestly. And we know that we need to get the data first, because I think we've been under this assumption that we have an overpopulation problem, and that, that's why euthanasia for time and space has been justified for so long. Get this population problem under control. Too many cats, too many dogs. But then you see the opposite problem in a lot of like New England states, for instance, where there's a waiting list, or, people are getting denied left and right, and there's just not enough dogs and cats. So we're first as a group just trying to get a handle of it, trying to get some data around this, of understanding, like, truly, do we have a lack of supply? And then if we are right that there actually is, if we can fix the problem of being able to get, somebody in Maine wants a dog, that we could find them a dog in a different state and get them that dog or cat. If we can fix those problems and fix the barriers around adoption, and we still don't have, enough supply in the country, then absolutely, I think we should be having those conversations. But something that we're talking about in our group is like, is that conversation today, or is that conversation happening in 10 years? And I think there's a little bit of a divide in our group. I think people are like, we're here, mostly some people that are in maybe some New England states that are experiencing empty shelters and feeling that. But then we've got people in Louisiana and in Texas that are like, we could send you, hundreds right now and still have more to bring in. And so that is sort of where we're at. We're not sure if that conversation is today to be approaching breeders and doing it responsibly, or is it a matter of fixing the challenges of a transport programs and barriers to adoption? But that's a good point, Mary. Thank you.
So I think the other part of that, Claire, is that you're right. Timing is so difficult to figure out when is that optimal time. So I think as more of you all are going to be working within your communities and moving outside of the shelters, it's being able to extend that hand to anyone that needs it, and to always be there for them, that you will probably start to have relationships with people that will become your allies instead of trying to vilify them for doing what they're doing. Because the whole thing is supposed to be, you know, we're trying to be as open as we can, and we're trying to keep judgments at home. And it feels like there's some opportunities there. And, you know, there's a lot of terms in our industry, and foster failure is one that I hate. And the other one is backyard breeders. I don't like that one either. And so, because I think honestly, if you polled a lot of people that are in animal welfare, some of them may have gotten their animals from rescue groups, breed rescue groups, shelters. Some would have found them on the street or stolen them, or some would have gone to breeders, right? I mean, like, it took me almost 9 months to get my dog from, you know, a rescue group. Like, who's going to put up with 9 months of filling out, you know, long 25, 30-page applications, having people come to my house to see it, having to do video walkthrough? I mean, who does that, right? Most people won't. If they're rejected, they'll go someplace else that, you know, someone will welcome them and want to, you know, help them. So I think
another part of that I always find interesting too is if there are people that are engaged in this other side of whatever you want to call it, but it is sort of animal welfare, people that are breeding dogs, like, why are we not engaging those people in conversations to be our fosters for nursing moms, or bringing these people into these conversations and offering an alternative income? Because maybe there are people that are doing that because that's their job, and we've been pushing them out of this industry. So I'm just really curious about that as well. Like, I had a dog at a shelter that I was running that was pregnant, and then the person got in touch with me and said who had lost his dog, and said, oh, I just really wanted our kids to experience a dog having puppies. And so, you know, we got all of the animals spayed, neutered. I returned that dog to the family, and he became a foster for us. And there's things like that where it's again, this inclusivity and like judgment that we put on the choices that people are making and why, and just assuming that people are, I don't know, just coming from a place of like assuming the best. I think we'll be able to solve for some of this.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Rory. And going back to what Claire was talking about customer service, I think it is a customer service situation. But I think when we think customer service, we only think adoptions are front counter, but I feel like animal services and field services is a big part of customer service and meeting people where they are. I mean, I myself got into the industry a dozen years ago, and prior to that, I never had a sterilized pet. We had outdoor German Shepherds, and we never fixed them, and we consider ourselves very responsible pet owners. And so I think in order to draw people toward us, I think we have to engage and develop positive relationships. And I think why Haas is really getting away from punitive measures and supporting people is a great start. But yeah, I mean, this is such a really interesting conversation. Brenda, what's going on in LA with this sort of stuff?
Well, I think in LA, I was just getting ready to put something in the chat, but it's not about LA. I think the hardest thing in LA will be to get the people who have been chanting, adopt, what is it, shop, adopt, don't shop, or whatever. There's going to be a hardcore group of those people that are going to be hard to slow down. But honestly, when I was in Seattle, we worked collaboratively with the Seattle Kennel Club. And it was a great relationship. They raised money for us. We showed up at all their dog shows and talked about rescue. And they had this amazing group of rescuers who went around to all the shelters, and they looked for the purebred dogs. And if we had a young, healthy purebred dog, they didn't pull it. They figured we could get it a home. But if we had a special needs dog, if we had older purebred dogs, they pulled them all and took care of them. So I can tell you that it is possible to be friendly and to work collaboratively, even with kennel clubs, if you're willing to put down some of the judgments. And you're going to have to know, I've got friends who breed dogs, and they breed more dogs than I think they ever should. However, I will tell you that I don't breed dogs at all, but I go to dog shows and I do show dogs. So you can be on both sides of the fence, you can be friendly and you can be sane, but it's going to be easier to convince us than it is to convince the whole community. It's going to take some time.
And I think, thank you, Brenda. And I think our Maddie's instructors, are some of the people on this call who have probably traveled to the most shelters out of anybody that I know, who have seen some really just some animals that would get adopted in New England in 5 minutes, right? It's not like we have this assumption that, to Claire's point, that there is pet overpopulation, that supply and demand don't match up. And I'm curious from, the instructors, what you all think about this conversation.
I'll talk. I travel a lot of places where there's overpopulation of animals, but my biggest struggle is not finding the groups that would take them. It's finding the transport to get them there and the requirements to get them out of a state. I work with below poverty shelters at many of the places that I go. They can't afford the health certificates and a lot of the ways and a lot of the transport fees and things like that to get them out. Right now I have a group in Maine that's begging for Texas dogs, and I can't find a Texas shelter right now that, because flights aren't happening, that can get them there in a safe, healthy time frame and afford the health certificates and all of that. So I think we run into more than just a supply and demand. It's also how do we get them up there to help them out.
Yeah, and like in our area for years, because we had so many animals coming into our shelter every year, and other shelters around us were bringing in animals from communities when we were like inundated and overflowing with animals. And so it's like, how do you balance those animals that do need help from the Texas shelters and everything that could potentially get to cities, but really prioritizing where they should go, that, if for like Maine and everybody up north that may not be getting as many animals, and how like shelters like ours now can like focus on our community that is still overrun with animals in other shelters, and just how to balance that and really prioritize where animals need to go.
Hey, Tori, can I ask a clarification question really quick about this topic, just related to your organization? I know that, being what KC Pet Project has done in Kansas City and just the amount of animals that you've saved, and sort of that's really been the perception of what your organization is your concern that, because I saw like the 3-star review because there were not enough pets, is this coming from internal staff feeling like, oh, we need more pets for our community, or is this more of an external, like you feel like you're not meeting the expectations of what your community believes that you are?
We are worried the latter. I mean, we're worried that people are wanting to adopt pets, and if we don't have them, they're going to find another place to go get them. So we still have shelters in our community that are bringing in animals from outside of the community, but then we have shelters down the street that are still euthanizing for space. And so we're trying to work with them, but also that's a lot of resources on us to be able to provide all that care for the animals when, we're putting a lot of expenses into a lot of these animals to get them ready for adoption. So that's where we are struggling. People are coming here and they're either disappointed that we don't have enough animals, or they're like, oh wait, they're all in foster, I thought they were all here. And so we're trying to like figure out how to market our animals that are particularly in foster and give them the tools that they need to be able to adopt those pets in foster and know how that they can meet them. But when they're just looking at our website, they're like, well, we came here looking for this dog, but over 50% of our pets are in foster right now. So yeah, it's a struggle. And we have 13 places to adopt pets in Kansas City that we have.
Or do you put the animals in foster? Their photos are on your website?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but the people want to come to meet them. So they want to figure out a way to set up an appointment.
Yeah, I could put it in neon green signs flashing that the pet's in foster, and people would be like, how old is it? And where is its location? It's not here. It's like, yeah, people just come here expecting that all of our pets that are listed on our website are going to be here.
I see some wheels turning with Kelly Dewar and with Jordana. Curious to hear from you, Jordana, what your thoughts are, and then Kelly, if you could chime in too about your thoughts.
So this is something that recently came across my plate, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it for like 24 hours, is areas that recognize they don't have the pets. They're getting adopted, shelters are, empty-ish, kind of what Tori's talking about, except they're not in foster either. They're not down the road. They don't have the pets to adopt to people. And I like the idea of partnering with those people that are, maybe responsibly breeding. But I do worry that there's also this separation of like those Southern dogs that come with all their diseases and their problems. So I think there is this kind of bigger issue of like, there's not a pet overpopulation problem, but there potentially is a problem with where they're coming from and if areas of the country want those pets, as opposed to being bred in their own backyard, so to speak.
That's a very true point, Jordana. The shelter that I'm talking about in Texas that we were trying to get animals out, they're all breaking with distemper, so I'm clearly not going to let them go up to Maine. So it's like, yeah, I have plenty of animals to give them, but do you really want what I'm going to send you, because you're not prepared for distemper and what the outbreak of distemper can do to your community.
No, for sure. And
shelter.
I'm talking about the pets, this is assuming that we have healthy pets to send you. We have dogs and cats that have met the requirements, but the unwillingness to accept those pets because of the what if, or because of the potential behavior problems or potential whatever it is. And it's I had never thought about it until very recently, but it became the timing of this conversation is appropriate, because I'm starting to feel like there is this separation that we're not talking about of if people want pets from the South, or would they rather have them bred in their own state, in their own city by breeders?
That's fascinating. Kelly.
So I have a couple of thoughts. The first is that here in Virginia, it's interesting because we cannot, like rescues and shelters around here, there is no access to small dogs anywhere. Like there are none in shelters. We have to import them, which is, a good thing and a bad thing. I think, just trying to figure out the transport, because there is a huge demand here. Even and the rescues that I know of, all do heavily, medical, aren't scared of taking on, pets who may have distemper and things like that. So I really feel like while we have animals who are dying for space, if we can at all concentrate on getting them to the places that, do want them, I think that's important. But I think there's a couple of ideas for you, Tori. Obviously everything is kind of going online and kind of rerouting people to like seeing not just your shelter building, but your website as a place to find pets. And then not necessarily during COVID, but using the shelter's building as an adoption center on like high traffic days. So like Saturdays, tell the fosters, bring your, pets in for 2 hours, stand around the parking lot, or put them in a kennel, take them out to the play group or something like that, and let your community know that this is when, a bunch of people can come and you will have a whole bunch of pets. When I started a rescue a few years ago, we worked with a shelter that really wanted us to start taking pets. And they said, you guys can come here on Saturday anytime you want and like just hang out on the lawn and adopt your pets out. And as a new rescue, it was like the most amazing thing. But I imagine that, there are probably other, rescues, and obviously you'd have to work out the details, but partnering with rescues for larger events and then developing those relationships, because when you see them every Saturday and then you have that Chihuahua that has a bite history who you really don't want to have to put down, they will, developing the relationship can be really, I think, can be really good. But again, it's COVID, so it's a little tougher to do that right now.
Mary brought up something that I've been thinking about quite a bit, in that, I know a lot of people that are always saying to me, yeah, I wanted to get a dog, but it took me 3 to 4 months to find the animal that I was wanting, and I wanted to rescue, but I couldn't find what I was looking for, you know. And I hear that frequently in Austin, even as many animals as we have here. And I think about that a lot. And then I also think about I feel like I'm thankful that I'm in this unique position where I get to hear from so many shelters doing so many different cool things and trialing and erroring so many different systems. And I just thought of this idea, and it may be a terrible idea, so I'd love to know from you guys what you think. But with one of the programs that we've been working on with APA is Dog and Dash. I don't know if y'all have heard of it, but it's fostering. We get people that are willing to foster, and we know kind of what animal they're looking for. And then as soon as one comes in that meets that criteria, we're calling them, and they are literally with sight unseen loading up their vehicle and with a dog that they're going to foster. And our return rate for that is only 5.97%. And we've been doing it since April, I think, April or March. I don't know. And it just made me think, like, I wonder if there's a way that we look at our customer service or look at our animal inventory, if you will, and think of it based on when we have customers coming in, how we're communicating those pets to them to move the animals quicker. I don't know. I was just thinking about that, like, criteria of when adopters come in, what they're looking for, and is there a way for them to know quicker or to know more about X fostered animals that fit that mold of what they're wanting. I think it's kind of a interesting thing there.
Yeah, Casey, I think that program came out of us brainstorming and literally being like, our process wasn't fast enough to keep up with the flow of animals that needed saving and how many people were coming forward during COVID. And so having to figure out, and it wasn't even like, a lot of times we don't know anything about the dog, that's going. I mean, we kind of know they're pretty easy, but we don't know everything. And I think the success of that was just being like, if you need to know every single thing about this dog, or if you're not, you have a very specific setup at home and you can't just bring any dog home, this probably isn't the program for you. If you're willing to take sight unseen and you want a dog today, this is it. And it was just really clear right from the gate. And it isn't for everyone, but I think it was the setting expectations up front. But I remember when Faith was brainstorming of how are municipal shelters doing it, how do we speed up our process on the APA end, that we're not hand holding every single foster, every single adopter. We just don't have the time. So it's interesting to look at how that was created. But I think just laying out those expectations, up front, is really helped that be successful. But that was a really good example.
And another example that was shared on one of the Monday calls, I believe, that we'll have a webinar about on November 5th with Tamsin from PMA Animal Care Center, is allowing for fosters to have dog daycare now at the shelter and doing playgroup. And because there are open kennels and just people dropping their animals off and knowing that that animal might go home with its adopter. So I think out of the box ideas like that, and that was a pilot program, but they're doing that. They're rolling it out as a program for all fosters with dogs that do well in playgroup, right? That's the key for that. But I think the length of stay was cut in half or something. It was less than a week for the dogs that were in foster. So that way they're there at the shelter, and people can come and see them. And you could mark on your calendar when those animals will be there or something like that. But I'm curious what other shelters are, if there are any solutions that you all are finding, if you're running into similar problems, having similar thoughts.
I was just going to chime in. I got a message saying that my internet connection is unstable, so let me know if I'm choppy. The The problem we're having is with animals that are appearing on our website and then disappearing so quickly that people are complaining that we don't have animals. And so it's partly because of the platform that we're using, that we're pulling animals off as soon as they have like 5 people on a waiting list. And then other animals just haven't made it, to the adoptable stage yet. So trying to message that we're still adopting out animals. There's animals in our care. It's good news that we have fewer animals. Like, I posted something like, don't fret. This is good news. That means they're finding homes, as faster than we can keep up with them. But we're still getting complaints, and like Tori said, we'll see reviews, somebody's giving a review and commenting that, they didn't have much of a selection, or, there's not a lot of animals there. So we will be combating that, I think, for a while, is trying to, help the general community catch up with where we are in reimagining the industry. But I don't know if others are encountering that too, that just, they have animals in their system, but they appear on the website as if there's no animals, or that there's few animals, and that they, are turning more people away, I guess.
Any other shelters have similar things happening for you all?
It's Kathy from Brampton. We have some similar stuff to what Chris was explaining, in that our shelter animal population is low. Our animals available for adoption are low. People are complaining that we don't have any animals. So similar to Tori, but that's a problem sort of across the board here in Ontario right now. So it's not like we have anybody next door. The rescue groups are finding the same thing. And I just wonder what the general population thinks from the standpoint of, do you think we just manufacture dogs in the back of the building that we can, where are we supposed to get these dogs from? Aren't you happy that the shelter doesn't have an over explosion of pets that we're trying to find homes for? So to go back to Chris's point, I think maybe we need to do a better job of messaging that this is a good thing, and that we've spent years promoting responsible pet ownership in the areas that currently don't have an overwhelming overpopulation of pets. Maybe that message has finally gotten out, and so and I think it also goes back to some of the public's thought process as far as pets as commodities. Like, we should just have them because you want one now. And I recall many years ago, decades ago, at the first shelter I worked in, we had a number of dog rooms that the public could enter to view dogs available for adoption. And adjacent to one of those rooms was our stray weight room. And that room had a door separating it from the adoption room. But the door had one of those narrow windows so that people coming back and forth could see somebody on the other side, and there wouldn't be a bump into each other thing. And routinely, we would have 40 dogs up for adoption in the adoption rooms. And routinely, people would walk through the adoption rooms, look at all the dogs available for adoption, and then come to the front desk and go, "What about those dogs in the other room? Can I see those dogs?" And it's like, what? These ones aren't good enough for you? These are the dogs available for adoption right now. So I think one of the things that came up much earlier in conversation in one of these calls, and that we're finding now too, is that shelters in some cases are strategically putting out one animal at a time up for adoption on the website or whatever. And so the length of stay is really short because the animals are just flying out the door. People have one animal to choose from. You either want that one or you don't. Moving on.
And I think too, working with other, organizations in your community. When I was volunteering at our local shelter, they had puppies one day, and we knew that it was going to be like overrun because of these puppies that had been marketed really well. And so they called all the other organizations in the area and got a list of the organizations who had puppies and how to get in touch with them. So they're just like, sorry, we don't, all of them were adopted. Here's a list. Here's where you can go. Not that we, that obviously takes time, but it was a community-centric situation.
I'd like to hear from the shelters. This is such an interesting topic. What are your fears about this, right? So we're talking about your concern that your constituents are not happy that you don't have pets, but are you concerned about potential reduction in donations, bad reviews? Like, what are your biggest fears?
It's Kathy again. I'm a municipal shelter operator, so we get tax dollars to fund us. So thankfully, I don't worry overly about donations, but my biggest fear is getting pushed back to the old model of sheltering where we are bringing more animals into the building. Because if people start complaining to our city councilors that, I tried to adopt from the shelter and they don't even have any animals, then I don't want to be in a position where council says, oh, well, and our council perhaps is particularly responsive to individual complaints, changing bylaws at the request of one resident in a city of over 600,000 comes to mind. But so yeah, I don't want to be in a position where we're directed to go back to the old way.
And that kind of goes back to like, it's probably picking up animals from the poorer communities so that the richer people can adopt them.
Other thoughts about Bobby's question? Oh, Erica, I saw you unmuted.
Yeah, I think it's tough. I think, right now, because we've never done managed intake and our front doors are still closed and we're doing things by appointment, that we are pushing a lot of people that don't have emergency surrenders to surrender on our website, and not surrender on our website, but list their animal with our rehoming program on the website. And those that are willing to hold on to a stray now have our website to look at and post the animal. And so they're more willing to do that. So what we end up with is, I used to say when people came through and said, oh, well, all you have are pit bulls. I used to say, well, actually, that's not the majority of what we take in. It's the majority that we have waiting on our adoption floor longer than 48 hours. Almost anything that wasn't that wasn't a pit bull was typically getting adopted in just a day or two. But now the majority of what we're getting in is pit bulls, and the majority of what's not being reclaimed is pit bulls as well. So, we're doing really, really good on reclaims. Like on dog reclaims, we're something around 40%. And that's the majority of animals that we were getting in before in terms of intakes. The vast majority of our animals are strays that come in. So I feel like we're really, really doing a good job, but we're constantly getting the feedback. Well, where are your other animals? Where are, the Yorkies and the Malteses and everything else? And as soon as one goes online, then we have 15 rescue groups that all want to transfer it. And we instituted a policy that we couldn't transfer any adoptable dog into a rescue for 3 days on the adoption floor. And so that, fortunately, we don't have a whole lot of rescue partners now because all they want are the animals that we can place in 72 hours. So our local Humane Society does not take animals from us predominantly. The vast majority of animals they take are from other communities because they're not interested in helping what we have most difficulty with, or taking any pit bulls at all for that matter.
So interesting. I really like that framing, Erica. I think that's it's really smart because it puts like, it asks a question, to people that are coming through, what are you looking for? And Kelly, I know you've done so much work around marketing foster pets and marketing pets in general, trying to, for the folks that are maybe looking for a pet because they like what they think that pet looks like, or, you know, maybe there isn't really like a great reason. Sort of how do you transition someone coming in for a Yorkie to understanding that there might be a little Chihuahua thingy in your shelter that we can get to yes with?
I think probably the most important thing to know is those cute little quirks that connect you with a pet. Just like we actually just adopted. He was terrible in the shelter, but the first morning he woke me up kissing me on the face, and like that one fact could totally turn somebody from Yorkie to Chihuahua. Just because, you know, it just making that emotional connection. And I think with foster, you have all the tools at your disposal, because you don't have tons of shelter stress. You know, you don't have the animal acting different or having like this really narrow behavioral repertoire because they're in the shelter. You get to see who they really are and get to learn all that stuff about them. So I think that can really help a lot too. And also training fosters, or, you know, giving them guidance on how to, you know, bring some of this stuff out and market them in ways that'll help.
We have Paula on the line from Waco, Texas, and I'm curious for a perspective from one of the communities that we're sort of talking about when we talk about having a lot of animals that still need homes. Paula, are you here? Maybe she's not. I see her name, but not her photo or video. Maybe we can circle back. But okay, so what are our next steps with this? Tori, I saw you had unmuted too. Didn't mean to bowl over you there.
Oh no, you're totally fine. I was just gonna ask a question. I can ask Faith offline, but like we also struggle a lot with like health certs and trying to move animals. Like we're right next, I'm a few miles from Kansas, and there's tons of like Kansas shelters that are also struggling, but it's just the struggle of like health certs and how to get them across the state line. So I was curious of like the struggles that Faith sees in all of her transport, and any wise words of wisdom in dealing with that.
I mean, Claire can talk to it as well. Claire sends probably more across state lines than I even remotely do, but super hard. It's easier if you get private jets, you know, private flights, because they don't necessarily require it. I'm not going to say which state and which transporter, but I did have one that sent animals from one state and had the rescue that was going to receive them come into their state lines, and they met at the state border, and they exchanged animals at the state border and then moved them. And that's happened on at least 12 transports recently for them. So they kind of found a little loophole through it. But again, I don't want to get into any trouble, so I'm not going to say which ones. It's not Kansas, so you're okay there. But yeah, so people are getting creative out there. It's hard. It's super hard. And it's really hard because a lot of private vets that will work with the shelters are charging you $35 and $45 per health certificate. It's a ripoff. So that's also kind of hard. Sometimes you can work a deal with the receiving agency to cover the health certificates. We do a lot of GoFundMes for the shelters to pay for the health certificates, and then the receiving partner will pay for the transport, just different things like that. But it's definitely a huge task to overcome.
Yeah, I accidentally spent $200 on one health cert, and I'm like, I can't believe that. It's crazy. But yeah, there's no rhyme or reason in the cost, especially if you're going to a private vet. So I think the most inexpensive route I've found is working with any sort of vet that's rescue friendly, that would just do, hey, for an hour of your time, how much would it cost, versus a per animal fee. But absolutely, I mean, if the source shelter is paying for a lot of the vetting, you know, then I think it's completely reasonable to ask for the receiving organization to help with health cert costs. But or even asking for just donations and things. But it definitely is a cost. But after that $200 mistake, I definitely am not going to private vets for those. The per dog or per cat fee it's pretty insane.
Maybe that's what we need a work group on, is how to get rid of the need for health certificates.
Well, and the other hard thing with that is there's like no reward for the veterinarians that are helping us, right? It's like, we don't know, like, I mean, I could name a few, but nobody knows who they are. They don't get any sort of pat on the back. They're not getting, I mean, maybe some money, but you know, it's like, why? Like, how can we thank them and elevate their work and highlight their work? Because they're the ones that are making a lot of this possible for us. But they receive little to no credit for it, and we're really just relying on their goodwill.
That's a really good point, because we've seen in a lot of communities where programs start with private vets, that the success that I'm thinking of Jacksonville in particular, where they started highlighting on social media vets that were helping them with neonates. And then all these other vets said, hey, we want to help with neonates, that they had previously reached out to asking for help with neonates. But, you know, now that someone's showcased and being sort of held up, I really love that idea. We need to do more of that. Claire, something that I think you have thought a lot about is, and Tori was Portland, but if we start thinking sort of closer to home, how do you recommend kind of reaching out to shelters closer to home and thinking about transporting animals closer into your organizations?
Yeah, I definitely have learned the hard way. I think the very first transport I organized was San Antonio to Portland. And it was just because I had zero contacts. And that was the only contact that came my way. And I said, okay, we'll send them if you're willing to take large dogs from San Antonio. And so that's how, you know, and then it gets hard to sort of think outside of that, because then you start establishing partnerships and you get comfortable working with groups that are across the country. But then it is time sometimes to like look and see, is this the most efficient use of funds and time and stress on the dogs and cats that you're transporting? And I think it was Chris Roy from Dubert that really introduced me to the idea of like drawing a circle around your city. So I won't take credit for this, but I totally believe in it, and seeing, you know, what's the safest place that you could transport in that circle. And if you're in South Texas on the border and there's nowhere in that, you know, 60 miles, then you draw it a little bit further and a little bit further. And then you go to basically the closest distance to you that isn't, again, to the tippy top of Maine or all the way in, like, you know, Canada. And so I think if we think that way, it pushes us to exhaust more local options and more in-state options, as well as looking at hubs. You know, I think the transport hub model is pretty genius. You know, if I just have from Texas to go to Oklahoma, that's way easier than spending all the money to go to Vermont or something. So I won't take credit for that, but definitely learning, you know, it's just better, I think, on everyone cost-wise, and stress on the animals and everything like that. But certainly something that takes time and a lot of relationship building to get there, and a lot of cold calls of like, hi, you don't know me, but I'd love to partner with you. So
we were doing in South Texas, and they're still doing it out of Palm Valley. There's a group in Dallas that takes the cats, the kittens, trucks them up to Dallas. They stay at her place for 2 weeks, and then they hop on a flight from Dallas into Canada. So we have a bunch of South Texas kittens and cats living in Canada. So it's really super cute. But we used another rescue group as like the place to stop and sit at, and then take the big flight out to Canada, because we couldn't obviously get a big flight out from Palm Valley.
Yeah, I've had a lot of luck. Last thing with just, I get a lot of no's, you know, of just asking, you know, are you willing? I can't tell you how many no's I've received of we're full, we're full. But instead of just ghosting that person, I ask like, do you have any recommendations, or who do you know like of a partner that might be able to help? And I can't tell you how many partners I've found just by having that third party like connect us. And now it's not just a random email from someone in San Antonio or whatever, you know, but just, you know, using every connection, even if they're full right now. If they say I'm full right now, but check back in a month, like I put a calendar notification, check back in a month, and make sure that you're staying sort of in their inbox and staying connected. But that's helped a lot. I think people get really discouraged when they get 1, 3, 5 no's from partners, like, you know, there's no options out there, but just keep plugging away. It's amazing, like just the context we have within Texas, in a state that you would think is just, you know, underwater. Rescues are coming out of the woodwork, and we've been able to move just a lot of dogs and cats just within our state by just pure perseverance.
I love that. This hour has flown by. This has been great. Thank you all so much. Next week, we have Kristen Hassan coming to speak about, Kelly, to speak about change, motivating staff. Is that right?
Hold on, let me check.
I think that's what we asked her to speak about. So motivating
Yeah.
staff, which I know we've had like a lot of conversations about in this group, but I think it'll be really great to hear from Kristen and have her join us next week. I appreciate you all so much. What, Kelly?
I'm looking forward to it. It could be good.
Thanks, everyone. I love spending this hour with y'all each week. And we'll see you next week.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.
Bye. Thank you.